All right, so in the interest of time, I think we should probably get started, and we will welcome anyone that joins along the way. But hi, everyone. My name is Leah Benford, and I'm the Executive Director of Rethink Green. I'm very happy that you've all decided to join us for this webinar, Planning for Climate Change Adaptation, and Mitigation through Asset Management. We are very excited to have two guest speakers joining us today. So Hassan Rouhani is a climate change specialist employed with Bonfield Township, and of course my colleague Simon Blakely, who is our program manager. He is overseeing the Smart Green Communities and Green Economy North programs. Before we start, I'd like to give you a little bit of a summary about our organization for those of you that don't know, and talk a little bit more about some of the programs and incentives and activities that we have happening over the next little bit. So I'm going to cue Mark to start the slideshow. Okay. Okay, so there we go. Now, Rethink Green is the overarching organization for many different programs, including Smart Green Communities and Green Economy North. Now, we are a Sudbury-based not-for-profit organization. We employ typically anywhere between 5 and 10 people at a time, given our program status. And we try to connect people, resources, and ideas to create a network of champions across Northeastern Ontario. We'd love to expand beyond Northeastern Ontario, but that's our projected area right now. So we undertake technical advisory, research-based works to educate and inform members about the benefits of transitioning to a low carbon economy. We focus on a bunch of different environmental initiatives. So in addition to our Green Economy North and Smart Green Communities programs, we also have some projects that we are doing with agriculture, local food production, plastic reduction, and kind of a variety of different things over the last 15 years. That's how long we've been in service, it's 15 years. We're also a designated Green Economy Canada hub. So Green Economy Canada is a national organization that is built to work on business sustainability, so reducing carbon emissions in businesses specifically. So we are one of 7 current hubs. There are more to come, and we work within that network to provide businesses in Sudbury with solutions to their environmental challenges. All right, so we have currently the Smart Green Communities program, which is it's developing 2 regional energy and emission plans for Manitoulin Island and the North Shore communities. So that's the main objective of this project. It's been going on for a couple of years now, and so there's been extensive consultation with the communities on the island and within that kind of geographic land base, which Simon is going to, sorry, the slides are just changing a little bit quickly, but that's okay. So yes, so when we were originally looking at this project, it was designed to help municipalities achieve help the municipalities develop studying their climate-led action plans. So we are currently funded by FCM to deliver this project, and we will be wrapping up in 2020. So we're kind of at the tail end. And in the past year, we have undertaken a detailed desktop review of the study areas to determine baseline GHG emissions upon a robust and consistent methodology, and actively engaged a broad range of municipal and First Nations stakeholders to obtain both quantitative and qualitative data regarding local energy emissions, current and emerging policy-based approaches, and future potential projects and initiatives. And we have also organized and participated in a series of workshops and public-facing events through the study areas to gain the broadest feedback possible. So lots of community engagement, lots of stakeholder engagement, lots of work with the people that live in these communities to see what they would want to see in preparing these reports. So we are now in the final stages of this project, and we have recently sought input from a local project advisory group and are gearing up to deliver some public consultation actually in the 2nd week of August. So we hope to learn as much as we can, gain as much feedback as we can, and really kind of make sure that we have enough input to close up this project. So Simon will be talking a little bit more about that week, which is actually going to take place the 10th of August. We're going to kick it off in the beautiful, beautiful communities of Manitoulin Island, which is a great place to be this time of year. And if you have any interest in that, or if that is where you're coming from and you'd like to learn more, please connect with us, as we will have lots of opportunity to see people in person, hopefully, from a safe social distance. And I think it's important to note that the goal has always been to provide capacity building support, to foster a collaborative approach, and to be the development of these regional energy plans. So of course, our intended projects and plans aren't the be all end all, but just creating that community collaboration. So Simon will be issuing a letter to all CEOs and band chiefs within the two study areas today. We welcome your feedback and encourage a more in-depth conversation as to how we can continue to collaborate and support this going forward. So all of that being said, Simon is the expert in that program and that project. So I am going to introduce Simon. Simon joined Rethink Green as our Green Economy North and Smart Green Communities Program Manager. He just joined us in April, and it feels like a lot longer because he's done such wonderful work for us so far. And he's gained approximately 16 years international experience supporting and enabling sustainable business practices across different levels of government, not-for-profits, academia, and the private sector. He was born and raised in the United Kingdom, where he attained a master's degree in urban environmental design, an undergraduate degree in geography and planning, and a level 2 certificate in principles of business and administration. If you want to talk more about Simon's experience, please do contact him. He now lives in North Bay, so Simon is it was really funny because we were so scared of remote work and having Simon join us, and this was kind of pre-COVID, and now it's always the office laugh that of course it's going to work out. Remote work is no big deal anymore. Simon is equipped to both understand and interpret how changes in political system, laws, and regulations can influence local decision making. He believes that localism and globalism can be considered two sides of the same coin when it comes to the realization of sustainable development goals. And Simon, of course, has an expansive network across Northeastern Ontario, and I would say Northern Ontario in general. He recognizes the need for community engagement and strives to ensure meaningful dialogue among stakeholders in a range of public policy and business-oriented issues. So welcome, Simon, of course, to our organization and to this webinar. I will throw it over to Simon.
Okay, hi there everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Sorry about that. There's some technical glitch, but yes, it's a pleasure to be joining you all today. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Leah and also to Hassan for agreeing to speak with us on the subject of asset management and how municipalities can pursue alternative approaches, perhaps that are not only more sustainable, but allow for more resilient futures in terms of the predicted effects of climate change. So I'd like to take about 10 minutes to go over some of the work which the team at Rethink Green is doing to promote a more sustainable future, with an emphasis on two of the programs and services that we offer. So before I do, I'd like to ask an open question to our audience, and feel free to enter your answers into the chat function, and we can return to these later. What would you like to see municipalities, communities, and households do more of to support the goal of sustainable development here in Northern Ontario? So as I say, we'll return to that later. So as Leah mentioned, my name is Simon Blakely, and I am the Program Manager at Rethink Green for the Green Economy North and Smart Green Communities programs. And in this presentation, I will first provide some background to the climate change and sustainable development agendas, including an overview of global and national political, scientific, and geographic issues. Next, I will then provide further details about the two programs and how Rethink Green is supporting and enabling businesses, municipalities, and First Nations to adopt more sustainable lifestyles. Next slide, please. So the term sustainable development has evolved from a long history of social action, largely viewed from an environmentalist lens, to a global movement of people now demanding a Green New Deal. An official definition of the term sustainable development was first presented in a document entitled Our Common Future, or the Brundtland Report, which was named after the research chair. The report was commissioned by the World Commission on Environment and Development and published in 1987. The findings of that report were finally accepted by the global community at the United Nations Conference on Economic and Development, also known as the Earth Summit, which was held in Rio de Janeiro in June 1992. So the definition stated that sustainable development is development that meets the needs of present generations without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So despite a period of relative inactivity in the early 21st century, a new international agreement was signed by most developed nations of the world at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Paris Accord, in December 2015. The Paris Agreement's long-term temperature goal is to keep the increase in global average temperatures to well below 2 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius, recognizing this would substantially reduce the risks and impacts of climate change. So in terms of sustainable development, it's in September 2018, an international panel on climate change reported that global emissions of carbon dioxide must peak by 2020 to keep the planet below 1.5 degrees. Lo and behold, the COVID-19 pandemic came along and almost forced us to reach that target, though some experts say we're still short. So according to some projections, we have 12 years to prevent the irreversible effects of climate change by reducing GHG emissions to below those 1990 levels. And a further meeting of global nations was tentatively scheduled to take place this year in Glasgow, United Kingdom, in November. This, however, has been postponed until spring 2021 at the earliest due to the current pandemic. Next slide, please. So as a signature to the 2015 Paris Agreement, under the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change, Canada has committed to reducing its GHG emissions by 30% below 2005 levels by 2030, and beginning work so Canada can achieve net zero emissions by 2050. The following chart highlights, the previous chart, highlights how, despite some additional interventions, we're still some way off meeting that target. So I'll now refer more to the programs that we offer at Rethink Green and some of the potential solutions that are on offer. Green Economy North is Northern Ontario's only membership-based sustainable business program. Our members have access to a wide variety of support, from technical workshops to one-on-one coaching. Achievements are celebrated by the community through media coverage, special publications, and events. Membership fees are tailored to suit the business sector and relative size. And working with our client base, we undertake annual energy assessments to determine current energy efficiency levels, and we utilize software and calculate changes in energy usage to determine progress, including energy efficient improvements and reductions in GHG emissions. We foster a culture of continuous improvement and aim to deliver cost savings to our members through reduced energy bills, rebates, and access to grant funding. The Green Economy North program represents our affiliation with Green Economy Canada, and the program forms part of a wider Green Economy Hub network, which covers cities and communities from Ontario, New Brunswick, and Alberta. So moving on to the Smart Green Communities program, the second component of my role is managing the Smart Green Communities program. This program is in place to support municipalities and First Nations by giving them the tools they need to achieve overarching goal of sustainable development. We undertake detailed research and provide a simplified breakdown of technical data so communities can truly understand their carbon footprint. The preparation of a regional energy emissions plan for Manitoulin Island has brought together 15 municipalities and 7 First Nations and resulted in the identification of shared solutions. In the coming months, we are looking to expand our service offer to include strategic planning advice, community engagement and development strategies, and active transportation, among other services. It's important to note there is no one-size-fits-all solution. All communities have unique characteristics, including their location, geography, size, history, climate, resources, and economic structures. And that said, we can all benefit from sharing ideas, experience, and best practices among us. So as Leah mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we are now progressing fast with the development of the 2 regional energy emissions plans. We've developed the following itinerary for our stakeholder engagement week, which will start on Monday, the 10th of August. The online consultation will run itself until Monday, the 31st of August. So on Monday, the 10th of August, the online REAP consultations and social media campaign will be launched. And the team will make itself to Manitoulin Island, where we hope to call in and meet some of you in person to give a brief overview of the project and share some materials. On the Tuesday, we've planned a public launch of the REAP at a press conference to be held on the Municipal Square, which adjoins northeastern Manitoulin and the islands, the waterfront at Little Current. Then between 10 and 2, we'll have a public consultation event outside, pending the good weather and social distancing requirements, and everybody is welcome to attend from the island and the North Shore communities. On Wednesday, we're planning a combined virtual and in-person stakeholder engagement workshop. This will take place live from the Artisan Centre or Boardroom at NEMI in Little Current and will start at 9 a.m. Refreshments will be provided for those present. Given that capacity is limited in person, social distancing requirements have required this. We will be encouraging a diverse but small number of stakeholders to be in person. So further details regarding registration requirements, either for the in-person or virtual component, will be issued in due course. Stakeholder engagement and community profiling will continue the following day, Thursday, 14th of August, and we're looking to get around the island and actually film some of our participating municipalities and First Nations groups and understand your stories. So this can form part of a component of the report when it's released in November. And aside from this, we'll have a certified energy manager on staff on the island. So on Tuesday the 11th and Wednesday 12th of August, we are hoping to attend some municipal offices and businesses and conduct some preliminary walkthroughs and baseline energy audits. So all of this information will be set out in a letter that I'll be sending today to CAOs across the region. And we welcome your feedback and hope to establish some plans to meet you there. So the final slide. So as you can see, here's my contact information. I'd love to hear from you on any of the components we've talked about, whether it's program specific or related to the trip we're making to Manitoulin Island. And we look forward to hearing from you. So it's also now my pleasure to introduce our special guest speaker for today, Hassan Rouhani. So Hassan has earned a PhD degree in civil engineering from the University of Sherbrooke, Quebec. His thesis focused on the influence of climate change on probable maximum flood in different watersheds. Afterwards, he was involved in different projects for public and private entities, helping produce their water resource and climate change studies, for example, at the City of Montreal and Brookfield Renewable Energies. Currently, Hassan is employed by the Township of Bonfield, where he serves as a climate change specialist. Hassan applies historical observed data and also projected data to analyze the trends in precipitation and temperature up to 2050, a year which many of you will recognize as being the goal for achieving global net zero emissions. Hassan has realized the benefits of introducing these trends within the asset management process. He also applies these trends to analyze new risks which could result as a consequence of climate change. So we're honored to welcome Hassan to join us today.
Thank you, Simon, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be among you today. And I'm going to share some insights with you about the influence of climate change on asset management planning and developing a sustainable asset management plan. Before starting my presentation, I would like to thank Rethink Green for organizing this webinar and for inviting me. Next slide, please. I'm going to start my presentation with the definition of an asset in general, and I will talk about municipal assets. Later, I will describe the asset management plan, how to develop it, and I continue my presentation with definition of sustainable asset management planning. And I wrap up my presentation with possible challenges in the process of sustainable asset management development and potential solutions for that. Next slide, please. So asset is anything that has a monetary value and is controlled by you. Next slide. Municipal assets, previous slide, please. Municipal assets are anything that is used by municipalities to deliver assets, to deliver services to residents. Slide, please. So as you can see in right-hand side, which is from the city of Toronto, parks, even bench of the parks, public transport, roads, culverts, anything that is used by a municipality for delivering services to residents are called municipal assets. In the city of Toronto, just to give you an idea, owns around $75 billion of municipal assets. Next slide, please. Assets are very tied to level of services, as I mentioned in the previous slide. Slide, please. So, for example, if we have a class 3 highway, which is a highway of maybe around few thousand vehicles per day, is not a busy highway. So, according to regulation of the government of Ontario, we need to remove the snow from such a highway 12 hours after the snow has stopped, and when the depth is 8 centimeter maximum. So with this condition, do we have to own, for example, multiple trucks to remove this snow, or maybe one of them suffices for our municipality and we can use the same to remove all the snow? If you have a larger municipality, maybe you need to purchase more trucks to remove the snow and deliver same service to your residents. Core municipal assets in municipalities, according to the definition, is all assets that are used for transportation, for transit, and for water. So that includes roads, bridges, culverts, sewer system, potable water distribution. Next slide, please. Along with core municipal assets, I like to talk about a little bit about different types of assets, which are generally either engineered or natural. So engineered assets are roads, bridges, and culverts, and anything that is man-made. And natural assets are parks, gardens, lakes, and anything that is natural, as the name explains. Next slide, please. So asset management slide is actually a financial plan that includes several steps. Slide, please. So asset management plan is a combination of financial planning, budgeting process, risk analysis, and strategic planning. We need to fuse all these steps to reach an asset management plan. I'd like to further mention financial planning and strategic planning. Financial planning talks about different kinds of planning approach that you follow to fund your projects. For example, it can be based on debt only, or you can draw money from reserves, or you can have some money from a third party. That depends on your municipality, how it works, cost of projects, and value of assets. A strategic planning is the specific kind of point of view about how to manage your assets. For example, it could be based on repair and maintenance. You can focus on repair and maintenance so you extend life of your assets. And in that case, you need to renew your assets later than somebody who does not take care of assets. Or it can be based on rehab activities. In that case, you spend less money on repairing. Instead, you wait a few years and you spend money in large repair activities. So you decide about how to plan for your asset management based on different kinds of financial planning and strategic planning. In Canada, 60% of core assets is owned by municipalities, which is worth $1,100 billion. Next slide, please. In Canada, we have $120 billion of investment gap in municipal assets. By this gap, I mean the financial gap which exists between the actual money that we spend on our core municipal assets and what is needed to be spent on these assets. You see here that the gap is mainly due to repair and rehab of transport and transit in Canada, and it is followed by community and cultural assets, like for example a municipal arena, or it is in water and wastewater assets. Next slide, please. So as you see, more than a half of municipalities, according to a recent survey, wanted transportation and transit to be primary focus of post-COVID infrastructure stimulus that is going to be funded by the government of Canada. So municipalities feel this gap and want this gap to be filled in short future. Next slide, please. What is the root cause of this gap? Most of Canadian infrastructure was developed around 70 years ago, when the knowledge of infrastructure society linkage was not fully developed. And after this rapid development, for many years, not many repair and maintenance was given to assets. So now we are facing some aging assets that demand repair and maintenance, but the funding is not there. It is because, as I mentioned, 60% of assets is owned by municipalities, but on the other hand, only 8% of dollar from taxes goes to municipality pocket. So there is a gap between what a municipality owns and what it needs to spend on assets. Next slide, please. In Ontario, this gap is $60 billion, which is almost half of this financial gap in Canada. And as of 2016, less than 1/5 of Canadian municipalities officially included climate change in planning. Slide, please. For that reason, the government of Ontario enforced municipalities to develop a detailed municipal asset management plan by July 1st, 2024. That is called Regulation 588/17. Slide, please. And the government of Ontario is asking municipalities with more than 25,000 population to include any future growth and any risk because of climate change for their municipality. Next slide, please. So here is a timeline of this asset management, sustainable asset management development. So you see in 2012, less than half of municipalities officially had an asset management plan. In 2014, the government of Ontario introduced the Regulation of Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act. And then in 2017, 3 years ago, asset management policy, this regulation of 588/17 was developed and asked municipalities to deliver asset management policy by 2019. Now we are in 2020. Next year is the due date for an inventory of all core assets. As I mentioned, core assets are those related to transportation and water and level of services. In 2023, all assets need to be included, and in 2024, a detailed asset management plan has to be included. And from the year after, review and any modification needs to be implemented. Slide, please. So as you see here, this is life cycle of an asset management plan. So first you assess your assets, and then you develop the plan, you implement the plan, and then it's like a feedback. You communicate it with different departments in municipalities, you engage them, and you review them in order to take corrective actions or preventive actions. Next slide, please. So asset management is actually a collaboration, a coordinated activity between different departments of municipalities: financial department, public works, engineering, planning and development. And the goal is to maximize benefits, reduce risks, and manage your financial resources in a reliable manner that is able to give same level of service to the residents. Slide, please. So let me give an example for that. Imagine that you have some leakage in the roof of your house. Most likely you prevent this and you repair it as quickly as possible because of value of the asset, which is actually your house. But if same leakage is happening in the old barn of your backyard, perhaps you don't spend even $1 to fix that because the value of asset is not worth it. Slide, please. But imagine that same old barn in the backyard is used to store an antique Rolls Royce, which even could be more expensive than your house. So you fix this problem, you repair this leakage quickly, because although the asset is not expensive itself, it is used to deliver a very, very valuable service. So there is a linkage, slide please. There is a linkage between value of asset, level of service, and asset management plan, which means that where you spend money, how you spend money, and on what asset. Next, please. So why did the government ask municipalities to develop this asset management plan? To enable municipalities to make the best decision for their assets and to increase level of independency of municipalities, so that municipalities can govern the assets, can decide about the money that is going to be spent on assets and the timing of this investment. Next slide, please. So what are extra loads on a municipality? The first one, as I mentioned earlier, is aging and delayed rehab, which is the problem everywhere in Canada. Slide, please. So in the graph that you see, you can decide to spend gradually in chunks of $10 million, for example, or spend $60 million to renew the whole asset, which perhaps the more economic point of view is to spend gradually this money rather than spending a large chunk of money on an asset. So the other extra load, the other source of extra load is population and usage. So Canada is following an increasing trend in population. So perhaps sewer system needs some upgrade to accommodate this population growth. Or maybe even you need to upgrade other assets because of this increasing trend. Could you please click on the truck? Earlier in this presentation, I talked about class of highways and how many trucks perhaps you need to remove the snow from your highways. You see here a highway 3, which I talked about earlier, is a highway that has between 4,000 and 5,000 vehicles per day. With this population growth, maybe you're going to have maybe same highway is going to be class 2 or even class 1, which means that you need to increase level of services for your asset and you need to spend more and more on the same asset. Another source of load to assets and asset management planning actually is climate change. So if more extreme rainfall events are expected, which actually is true, perhaps we need to spend more money on our culverts as an expensive asset. More hot days ahead, so perhaps for renewing a pavement, we need to use a higher grade of pavement. In the table here, developed by National Cooperative on Highway Research Program by the University of Texas, a test was run on 1,200 culverts, a municipality with 1,200 culverts. So you see that if you do all repair and maintenance, after 2 decades, you have no culverts which is in poor condition. If you do nothing, 1/4 of culverts are in poor conditions after 2 decades. And if you have delayed repair and maintenance, 60% of culverts will be in poor conditions after 2 decades. So that shows the value of asset management planning. Next slide, please. Asset management plans, sorry. Asset management plan helps you to learn the actual value of your assets, and then you make a harmony between the cost and the investment on each asset, the risk of failure of this asset, and the opportunities to save money on that asset. And then it helps you to invest the right amount of money on right asset with the perfect timing. What do we need to develop an asset management plan? So the first step is to learn about the status of your assets. Are they in good condition? Are they in poor condition or fair? Fair condition is a condition that demands the less amount of investment. If the asset is in good condition, you need to spend lots of money to keep it good. If it is in poor condition, you need to spend lots of money to make it functional. And then you need to define level of services. Sometimes it's based on demand of community. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier about removing snow from highway, it is by the legal requirements of provincial or federal government. And then you define strategies, which I mentioned earlier, specifically financial strategy and strategic point of view for asset management plan. So why do we need to consider the future in asset management planning, and why an asset management plan should be sustainable? Slide, please. So goal of asset management plan is looking into future. The whole idea of an asset management plan is to think about the future and how you spend money in a smart way that helps asset to remain functional and deliver a reliable level of service. So it's an inherent part of an asset management to include future. Also, it helps resiliency of the community. Resiliency is the capacity of absorbing shocks and return to an equilibrium after a shock. So imagine, for example, if you have a reliable asset management plan, you know that, for example, culvert X is going to fail in 2-3 years. So you're ready for that. So whenever it fails, you're ready to replace it quickly, and you don't get stuck with a culvert that needs to be repaired or replaced. You're ready for that because you had planned for that. And finally, with an asset management plan that includes future, you can manage risks. For example, if you're aware of climate change, you know that you're expecting more and more floods, more frequent floods and larger floods. So you can manage road maintenance and road repairs with knowing that flood is going to be more frequent. What is a sustainable asset management plan? What is sustainability? I don't spend much time here, as Simon mentioned this to you. Sustainability is using your resources in a manner that does not compromise the future. So here we see downtown Vancouver, and if the municipality is about to fix the situation and stop any kind of flood with dikes or any kind of other flood stopping techniques, it is going to cost $9 billion. But if a major flood happens, it is going to cost 19 to $22 million. So perhaps it's more sustainable, it's more future-wise to fix the situation now rather than let it go point of view and give the same situation to the future generation. So we need to make the best decision with our financial resources to deliver a reliable level of services to the residents and to future generation. Next, please. So this is the life cycle of an asset. First, you identify the need. Do we need an asset? For example, do we need a new culvert, a bridge, a road? And then you design it, and then you construct it, you maintain it, and eventually you dispose it, you get rid from it. Slide, please. These are two different parts that have the most potential for sustainable development, and your asset management plan could be sustainable if you take a good care of these two parts, design and maintenance. Next, please. So Simon mentioned the history of sustainability. It was developed in 80s, sustainable development approach until the Paris Agreement that was explained by Simon. Next slide, please. So I'm going to offer some sustainable examples here. In the left photo, you see a rain garden, and in the right one, you see sandbags. Both are used to stop flood. But which one is sustainable? Perhaps the one that remains for the future and does not compromise the resources for the future. Sandbags are ad hoc. They can be used once, and then you need to get rid of that. They cannot be reused because of risk of contamination. But on the other hand, rain garden can do the same, can stop flood, and it remains for future generation. So in your asset management plan, you can decide how to resolve problem in a manner that is good for future. The solution remains for the future. Of course, it depends on your financial situation, geographical situation, even culture of society. It depends on many things. But before doing anything in developing an asset management plan, you need to think of what is the sustainable solution for that. Even we have sustainable office supply. You can buy papers that are sustainable. You can buy laptops that are sustainable, which means that they have been developed in sustainable companies. So they don't compromise the need for future, and they have the minimum impact on the environment. Even, for example, if you need a road for your municipality, you have different options. You can have a gravel road, you can have asphalt, concrete. Perhaps the most sustainable is gravel because it does not compromise the imperviousness of the surface. It demands less maintenance. and it uses less material. So if the situation allows you, perhaps you could use a gravel road, depending on the situation, as I mentioned. On the other hand, with developing multiple roads, this is just an example. You can manage the demand in your municipality. So if you have an expensive chunk of road, which demands lots of money for snow removing, for renewing the pavement, maybe you can develop some back roads, some gravel roads, so that the residents could use them, and so you can distribute the investment on those roads with that approach. Next slide, please. So what is the connection between climate change and a sustainable asset management plan? So are you renewing a pavement which is going to last for example, 20 years in your municipality? So perhaps you need to check to see if this road is in a flood zone. In that case, perhaps it's not too much sustainable to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, and after 2 years, the road gets washed by a large flood. Or, for example, are you replacing a culvert? Large rainfall events are going to be more frequent and even larger in the future. Slide, please. So you need to take care of that and perhaps enlarge your culvert. As an example, MTO has urged employees to take care of future rainfall in developing culverts that belong to MTO. Finally, are you making a road with this increasing trend of temperature, maximum temperature that asphalt can bear can be compromised by this trend of temperature. So perhaps you need to increase grade of your asphalt so that it can withstand future hot days and heat wave. Next slide, please. So what are barriers in a sustainable asset management plan? Perhaps there is a knowledge gap, as this is rather a new field. But fortunately, there are some workshops offered by FCM and Association of Ontario Road Supervisors, or FCM and Ontario Society of Professional Engineers, or other organizations that teach sustainable asset management plan development, or some other professional communities like Asset Management Ontario, which is focused on municipal asset management across Ontario. There are some financial shortage, but on the other hand, there are some sources for funding, mostly offered by FCM. Some of them are offered by the government of Ontario, like MEP, Municipal Energy Plan, or by bilateral agreements. Also with this new Safe Restart offered by the government of Ontario, government of Canada, sorry, the federal government, there could be some sources of funding. Finally, there could be some resistance to change to develop sustainable asset management plan, but I'm sure that if you present benefits of such an asset management plan, a sustainable asset management plan, everybody would agree that in long term it saves money for municipalities. Just be careful that for some services offered by FCM, a resolution might be needed by council, but this is not the declaration of climate emergency if your council is not ready for that now. Next slide. So there might be some insufficient human resources because asset management plan, actually, how to say that, does not belong to any department. For example, official plans and bylaws belong to certain departments. Financial plan belongs to financial department of your municipality, but asset management plan belongs to everybody. So you need an asset management coordinator to work on that. If you don't have such an employee, perhaps shared services between you and other neighbor municipalities who could have this kind of human resources could resolve the issue. And finally, there are some uncertainties when we talk about climate change, because it's unknown, it's the future. But as a matter of fact, different governmental portals like Climate Data or like Climate Atlas offer you a wide range of possibilities, so you can get an idea of what future looks like and what is the average range of temperature or precipitation in 20 years or in 50 years, and you can develop your plan based on that, despite the fact that this uncertainty remains there, but at least it gives you some level of understanding from the trend of precipitation and precipitation and temperature in the future. Next slide, please. I wish to thank Rethink Green again for organizing this webinar and for inviting me. And I'd like to thank Federation of Canadian Municipalities for funding my project, along with the Township of Bonfield. And thank you so much for your attention. I have listed some resources here. Specifically, I want to talk about Asset Management Readiness Scale Workbook developed by Rethink Green. This is a very useful tool for you to understand what is the maturity level of your municipality and to initiate your sustainable asset management plan for the municipality. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you so much for doing that presentation, Hassan. There's obviously there's lots of information there to go at, and I'm sure many of our listeners, watchers of this presentation will have questions, whether that's now or whether individuals want to follow up afterwards. We can Rethink Green, we can certainly field those on your behalf, because obviously you do have full-time employment elsewhere, and but I know people would want to tap into that knowledge base. So we could do a follow-up meeting perhaps, and then maybe do a paper to responding to any specific inquiries in the next few weeks. But if you're willing to do that. There was also there's a resource that we've developed in consultation with Hassan, which basically can assist municipalities if you've not yet entered into any of the programs that take you on this pathway to developing an asset management plan, which we give some tips and guidance essentially on some of the best practice measures that you could take to really make sure that when you do engage your colleagues, that it's really encapsulates what everybody's needs are in that process. It is new territory for a lot of people. Regardless of which sector you work in, often we've found in the past that we can work in silos. So the more that we can break down some of these perceived barriers, if not actual, and collaborate to develop shared solutions, and more that we can really build this sustainable future. So I'll just check if there's any questions come in. There was one question, first of all, related to my presentation earlier, just clarifying some of the timeframes for the Manitoulin outreach that we're going to be doing. So I'll just briefly repeat that. So on the Monday, we will be traveling to Manitoulin Island, and we'd love to connect and engage with different municipalities and First Nation groups as we work our way there. On the Tuesday, we'll be doing a press conference, which will be held in the square at 9:30 a.m., adjoining NEMI's municipal offices. And then between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock on the same day, in the same square, we'll be inviting the public to come and review some consultation material that we've produced and provide us with their feedback about how the regional plans could be further improved. The day after, on the Wednesday, will be largely focused on people that are more engaged, more likely to attend a seminar such as this, really to municipal, First Nations leaders, community interest groups, and we'll be facilitating a blended in-person and virtual workshop to really drill in a little bit more on the projects that could be achievable in the short, medium, and even longer term. Then on the Thursday, the day afterwards, we plan to get around a little bit further to some of the municipalities and maybe do some one-on-one interviews, get some qualitative data from yourselves, perhaps do some videography and actually build more of a record of some of the steps that we've taken to engage the public. And at the same time, we'll be having these preliminary walkthroughs and energy audits. So if anybody's interested, you can reach out to us on that. So hopefully that covered that question. So before I look to see if there's any, because we only have a few minutes left from the public. Hassan, when you were mentioning there about the, say sewer systems and upgrades and potential to do that,
Mhm.
kind of occurred to me that, sometimes where you have like integrated systems where it's absorbing a lot of stormwater runoff as well, there's that extra capacity being put on the system that we could be more efficient in terms of the processing of raw sewage if we perhaps build more resilient infrastructure at the surface level, whether that's green roofs, green walls, more tree planting, generally just a permeable surfaces, opportunities really to lessen the impact. I just wondered if you had any comments or experience about where that's been a success, perhaps.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is very relevant, and that's true. I remember, according to a study that was done in France, if I recall correctly, green roof, which you mentioned, has been proven to reduce the flood by at least 10%. And this is the only the benefit of flood. Green roof has many other bilateral advantages as well in reducing the heat island effect, which is now a serious problem in many municipalities, like in Montreal, in Toronto, and in many other municipalities across North America and Europe. And by the it also has some other advantages. So it can reduce acoustic level of high-rise buildings. I don't know the exact mechanism of that, but I know that green roof is famous for reducing flood, heat island effect, and acoustics. So it's like a win-win strategy, which is good for everything. And it's not really costly. It's very sustainable. It remains for the future. Future generation can take advantage of that while it serves several purposes. And of course, yeah, as you mentioned, it reduces the load from sewer system so that surface runoff would be less in the future.
Okay, I had one more question before I just go to the publics as well. So you mentioned it as well about the design and maintenance side. So we kind of covered the design there, but maintenance. So what additional tools, resources, funding might people be able to access, or should they, in your opinion, be able to access to train and educate the workforce and staff so that when this new infrastructure comes into play in the future, that it's maintained because a different skill set, and whether it's the education system, like how do you see that panning out in the future?
Well, when we talk about maintenance, many other factors come to play actually. Let's formulate it this way with an example. So there is a regulation for Ontario highways in terms of potholes, when you need to fix them and how you need to fix them. It depends on depth, diameter, and many things. And we know that with climate change, with frequent freeze and thaw events, it's going to be intensified and potholes are going to be more frequent. Okay, so we need to fix them more frequently. We need to spend more money on this repair and maintenance activity. But is it sustainable versus changing the whole chunk of road or not? That needs an engineering and a financial analysis, along with asking perhaps public works crew and manager to join this analysis to see if it is financially feasible, to see if it is practically better to renew the whole chunk of road, or maybe it's really better and more sustainable to fix those small potholes rather than fix the whole piece of road. So it is a mix of what you mentioned. It demands education for the crew of public works. It demands some analysis, some engineering analysis, and some budgeting and financial study, in addition to some climate change investigation. Are we going to have lots of more thaw and freeze events in the future in municipality X, or no, maybe a little bit, or maybe even the trend is decreasing, like in Toronto, the frequency of thaw and freeze events is decreasing in Toronto, but not in Northern Ontario. So it's a really multifactorial question.
Absolutely. And so there's just another question here. It says, how do you determine the value of a service in asset management planning? Are there specific steps?
Well, does it mean monetary value of service? Because it's hardly possible to attribute monetary value to service that we offer. For example, collecting garbage or removing snow or anything that municipality does, which is based on either regulations or community requirement. There is no monetary value for that, but you need to deliver those services. For example, in my municipality, residents can go to landfill once a week. Maybe in an adjacent municipality, it's 2 times per week. So level of services is adjusted by requirement of community, or maybe provincial or federal regulations. Well, this is the question of whether governing a municipality or a government like a business or not. If it was like a business, we could attribute some monetary value for that and saying that removing, for example, snow from this road is costing, I don't know, $2,000 per kilometer, because private businesses would charge that. But municipality is not like a business, at least right now that we are speaking. So it's hardly possible to attribute exact monetary value to services that we deliver.
Yeah. And just on that point, earlier you were saying, you know, whether a municipality, obviously depending on the size, the scale of the work they need to do, whether they have a designated asset management officer that's looking at this, or if they're on a smaller scale, whether somehow that's blended into the work of the climate change coordinator. There's a good synergy there in terms of planning for the future. Absolutely. And the consultation element of working with colleagues. And then, of course, there's Rethink Green ourselves, that we can potentially step in to facilitate workshops, to convene people, to help understand what the issues and challenges are, and form a mediator Absolutely. Or moderator in those discussions, depending on how contentious they get. So, yeah, so those are kind of the main questions that have come in. As I say, if anybody watching this today or after the fact, we will be sharing this video as a recording on our website, and the link to that will be circulated on our newsletter as well. So feel free to share, feel free to reach out on any of the issues and topics we've covered today. Once again, Hassan, thank you so much for joining us and for the time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Everything that you've done in the presentation, and it's been a pleasure to work with you in bringing this forward today.
Thanks, the pleasure is mine. I appreciate it.
Okay, so unless Leah's wants to say some parting words, then I believe we will call that a day, and thank you everybody for attending this webinar.
Yes, thank you everyone.
Okay, have a good day.